You say yes when every part of you is screaming no. Someone asks you for a favor you don't have time for, and before your brain even finishes processing the request, the word sure is already leaving your mouth. You volunteer for things you resent. You stay silent when you should speak. You shrink yourself to make room for everyone else, and at the end of the day, you're exhausted in a way you can't quite explain. This isn't a scheduling problem. It's not a time management issue. This is something much deeper. And if you've ever felt that strange guilt that hits the moment you even think about saying no, this video is going to explain exactly why that happens and what it says about the way your mind was built. Most people think that people pleasers are just too nice, too agreeable, too passive. But that's not what's actually happening. People who can't say no aren't weak. They're not naive. In most cases, they're some of the most emotionally intelligent, perceptive, and self-aware individuals in the room. The problem isn't their character. The problem is a deeply wired psychological pattern that was installed long before they were old enough to question it. And here's what makes it so difficult to break. It doesn't feel like a problem most of the time. It feels like kindness. It feels like responsibility. It feels like being a good person. Until one day, you realize you've built an entire life around everyone else's comfort, and you have no idea what you actually want anymore. To understand why this happens, you have to go back to the beginning. Psychologists who study attachment and early development have found a consistent pattern in people who struggle to set boundaries. In many cases, the inability to say no is a learned survival response, not a personality trait. As children, many people pleasers grew up in environments where their emotional needs were conditional. Love, approval, and safety were things you earned by being good, by being helpful, by not causing problems. Conflict was dangerous. Disagreement meant rejection. And somewhere along the way, the young brain made a calculation. If I keep everyone happy, I stay safe. Psychologists call this the Fawn response, a trauma-adjacent coping mechanism where the nervous system learns to appease others as a way to avoid threat. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. It's the fourth stress response that almost nobody talks about, and it's running silently in the background of millions of people's lives. The child who learned to fawn becomes the adult who can't say no. Not because they choose to, but because their nervous system never learned that it was safe to do anything else.
So what does this actually look like in real life? There are 5 core patterns that show up again and again in people who struggle with this. Pattern 1, preemptive agreement. Before someone even finishes their sentence, the people pleaser has already started nodding. They're not listening to decide. They're listening to figure out how to say yes. The decision was made before the question was asked. Pattern 2, guilt as a compass. For most people, guilt is a signal that they've done something wrong. For people pleasers, guilt is triggered by the possibility of disappointing someone, even when they've done nothing wrong at all. The mere act of considering their own needs produces an immediate wave of guilt. This guilt isn't moral, it's conditioned. Pattern 3, invisible resentment. Because people pleasers rarely express what they actually feel, emotions don't disappear, they accumulate. They say yes with their words and no with their energy. Over time, this creates a quiet resentment that has nowhere to go. They don't get angry at the people making demands. They get angry at themselves for not being able to refuse. Pattern 4, identity erosion. When you spend years prioritizing everyone else's preferences, something strange happens. You lose track of your own. Ask a chronic people pleaser what they want for dinner, what they enjoy doing on weekends, what they actually believe about a controversial topic, and many of them genuinely don't know. Their identity has been slowly replaced by a mirror that reflects whoever they're with. Pattern 5. The exhaustion spiral. Constantly monitoring other people's emotional states, anticipating needs before they're expressed, managing everyone's comfort while suppressing your own. This is cognitively and emotionally exhausting at a level most people around them never see. The people pleaser looks fine on the outside. Inside, they're running on empty.
Here's what the research actually shows about the long-term cost of chronic people-pleasing. Studies on emotional suppression consistently link it to elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep, and a significantly higher risk of anxiety and burnout. When you habitually override your own needs, your nervous system doesn't relax. It stays on alert, scanning constantly for the next threat to someone else's mood. But the deepest cost isn't physical, it's relational. People pleasers often believe that saying yes makes them more loved, more needed, more secure in their relationships. The opposite tends to be true. When you never express a genuine boundary, people can't actually know you. They know the version of you that agrees with everything, and that version, no matter how likable, is not the real you. The connection you're so desperately trying to protect is being built on a foundation that doesn't exist. So what does psychology actually recommend? The first and most important step is recognizing that saying no is not the same as being unkind. This sounds simple. It is not simple for someone whose nervous system was trained to equate refusal with rejection. The rewiring takes time, but it starts with a single reframe. A no to someone else is a yes to yourself. Therapists who work with people pleasers often use a technique called the pause, a deliberate delay before responding to any request. Instead of the automatic yes, you train yourself to say, "Let me think about it." And in that space, you ask one question. Do I actually want to do this? Or do I just not want to deal with the discomfort of declining? That question, asked consistently, begins to create something that chronic people pleasers rarely experience: a genuine choice. If you recognized yourself in this video, understand one thing clearly. This pattern developed because at some point in your life, it kept you safe. It wasn't a flaw, it was an adaptation. But you're not that child anymore. And the people in your life who are worth keeping, they don't need you to disappear to feel comfortable. They need you to show up as someone real. Learning to say no isn't about becoming cold or selfish. It's about becoming honest. And that honesty, with yourself first, then with others, is where something different can finally begin. If this resonated with you, subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the psychology behind the patterns most people spend their entire lives never questioning.